So I was very used to hearing the pitfalls that everybody else had done. So even before I started the studio, I actually called up, interviewed Jaren from like Action Fiction Games, Matt over at Mage Hand Press. I went through and I was like, hey, what do you got to learn? And then they looked at me, and a lot of times they were like, Rick, I'm taking notes from you, not the other way around.
Keep it nerdy. Keep it nerdy. Keep it real nerdy. Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first. Let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
Yeah, my nerdy passion basically is drawing.
Correct. I'm a breeder of tarantulas, importing tarantulas and some other critters.
I am a harpist. I do mainly Celtic harp, video game songs, songs from nerdy TV shows.
Obviously, I'm big on Star Trek.
It is creature design, fantastical biological creations out of watercolor.
We are dice retailers.
Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first, so let them rap a verse so they can all be heard. Welcome to Nerdpreneur, where we have fun conversations with people making money with their nerdy passion. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Frank.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. He is a longtime writer and game designer and the co-founder of Storytellers Forge, Rick Heinz. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Great to have you on, Rick. This is actually our second time chatting because this is like our official chat on mic, though. Excited to get you on the real show. And for everyone who doesn't know you already, what is your nerdy passion?
Oh, my nerdy passion is definitely metal music and coffee, which somehow translated into me getting involved in both authorship and the TTRPG industry, and then thus launching into building a massive studio. Because, I mean, when you try to replace your blood with coffee on a regular basis while listening to metal lyrics that you can't understand anyway, it's perfect segue towards being an author.
I feel like some of your themes within the adventures that you have written are kind of metal influenced as well. Aren't you working on something right now that's kind of like heavily based on like kind of evil in some capacity?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean, music is actually a massive inspiration for my life. And it actually was the hallmark of what started off everything that would eventually become Storytellers Forge Studios. Many years ago, I used to work in concerts at Chicago, and I had a bunch of metal friends over at my house, and they're all band members from all these like famous metal bands, and we're all drinking mead as you do. And they were talking about how hard it is to get metal music out there. And at this time, I'm already dabbling with being a writer. I already had published my first book and things like that. And I was like, guys, I could run an entire campaign to your album. And they were like, everybody got really quiet in the room. Everybody started looking at me, and I was like, ah, shit, I'm going to be writing a full campaign book now, aren't I? And then it transpired into one campaign book that spawned into a second transmedia property where we ended up partnering up with different bands and even a larger orchestra. And then our current project, which is the Dark Carnival, is utilizing and collaborating with the band V is for Villains to create this be evil but be magnificent campaign storyline novel music type thing.
What was the TTRPG that was this metal inspired project? What was it called?
The first one we did would be the Red Opera, Last Days of the Warlock, and then it was followed up with a campaign called the Black Ballad, which is the perfect game to run after you TPK your party. And that one we got to work with not only Dia Morte, we got to work with Symphony X, and even Mike Pittman from Riot Games, the crew behind Pentakill. That was so awesome. Wow. And we released that one, and then I was looking at the Dark Carnival project, and I was like, this one, we want it to feel different, and I need to find a band that embodies over-the-top villainry. And V is for Villains is a convention band along with the likes of Aurelia Voltaire, Protoman, and they have this great following, and they do this synthwave industrial style music, which I thought was an interesting pairing with D&D. And we partnered up with them, and we're going to crowdfunding pretty much right away, even though their soundtrack is, behind the scenes, it's mostly done. So
that's awesome. I've been getting into synthwave a lot more lately, so I am going to check those people out right after this. One of the things I really love about all these campaigns that you've designed or worked on, and it is the music side of it. I thought that was really interesting because it's not just this last one that has music not only inspired, but also like accompanying the actual adventure, right? Like there is stuff to do. Like this was the same with the Warlock one you did, the Red Opera, and then you also had like the ones you just said. I mean, Sirens had a bunch of music in it. Like there was all these things that where music is paralleled towards the adventure. Is this normal, or is this just you?
This one's definitely a just me thing because I write to music, right? And I can't write a novel. I have soundtracks for every character. I storytell to music, and actually, over the Dark Carnival, and I suppose we can come back to this later on. We kind of found our studio's guiding light that our brand is we make immersive TTRPGs in a box that always come with like novels, teas, coffees, and things like that based around the campaign, usually designed in conjunction with these other partners. And even the books that our studio is publishing, one of the projects that we're going to be publishing is Cthulhu Dreamt, written and designed by the team Action Fiction. The reason we picked them up to help and aid with their publishing is because they had the band Cthulhu Dreamt and already a novel being written with this experimental TTRPG. And I'm like, this fits everything that we want our studio to do. We want to do cross transmedia collaboration in our projects. Let's just go big on these projects. And so I think it's going to be every single project we do. I mean, I'm even working on taking our audiobooks and turning them into scripts, and then working with music composers to make custom soundtracks for novels at this point to go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is something that enhances the entire experience. I produce an actual play podcast where there's a score behind it, right? And the raw files of people playing versus the one where you actually score it and add in sounds and actually make it. It's about that exact word, immersion. It's about creating something where you get sucked into it. And music has that incredible ability to evoke that for people. You just mentioned something that I think is really interesting in your process, where you write to music, you come up with soundtracks for characters. Can you talk a little bit about your process and how music, well, it doesn't have to be necessarily about music, but what is your process for creating a great adventure?
Geez, ask the author and how you design a great adventure. All right, everybody, listen, we got about 2.5 hours in this.
We've got you the rest of the night, right? No.
Yeah. So, okay, let's say usually it comes up with like the title, you know what you're writing anyway. Usually if I'm hired by another studio to write something, I kind of know what it's about. I am pleased to announce I got to work on the official Crow TTRPG, right?
Oh, wow.
And that was like my nerdy dream come true from a goth 90s Rick. And so that one was easy. There's the Crow. They have an iconic soundtrack. You just pair the two together and just put that on repeat while I start outlining, and just play that for the rest of the night or the rest of the month as you write that adventure. For other things like the Red Opera or the Black Ballad, I would listen to a lot of Dia Morte's music or the Budapest Scoring Orchestra, music in theme with the vibe that I was shooting for. My novels are completely different, though. When I'm doing long form fiction, I will take characters and I will literally spend hours upon hours just exploring the depths of the internet, Spotify, Pandora, anything to find music in the right vibe, lyric or not. And Then I'll see if I can find music videos of it. And if I can, and the music video still hits when I watch it that way, I usually bake it into a playlist. And I'll have playlists for every character. And then whenever I'm writing that character's chapter, I'll have like certain songs that I'll like go back to and pull that character's stuff up. Importantly, though, none of the music can be in English or understandable.
Yes, I was going to ask about that because writing with actual words is so distracting when you're hearing a language you understand.
Yep, that's actually why I'm a big fan of like metal and folk metal, but I have like French pop. I have anime soundtracks up the wazoo of like, here's this character's song, and I'll listen to Bollywood or like the crazy where they take the Wakanda band, where they'll take the music in ancient Japanese style and then mix it up to modern covers. And so I'll listen to music from all across the spectrum based on which character it fits their vibe. And once I have the music, that's when I really start outlining. And then my outlines are pretty nuts. I will have entire spreadsheets with every chapter scene by scene, because then I'll also do something where I'll go back through and I'll write commercials for every chapter as if I'm going to sell that in copy or make it like a part of a Shadowrun universe. Even for things that aren't cyberpunkish or related in any capacity to something that's very capitalistic, I found that making commercials in fun, cheeky ways about my chapters actually give me really good taglines or like quotes, or help me like brief the end of a 200,000 word project.
I was going to actually ask about that because, the log line of writing a script is usually pitching the project to producers, to give that like distilled idea of what the story is. Is that kind of the idea of this commercial side of things, is to create something that's a concise, summary of that chapter?
Yeah. So when I published my first book, it was through a company called Inkshares. And even though I never ended up following through down that sort of Hollywood plan of take your book to go get scripts made for it, I learned the process of writing a treatment through that publisher, right? And that treatment, it's a nice 1.5 page synopsis of your entire bit. It was very difficult to ask an author to take his 140,000 word novel and condense it down into a treatment. But since I start off very small with sort of the snowballs and I have all these commercials in place, I found that pivoting off of those into what my book is about, or even my adventures, was really handy. And surprise, I did not realize this at that time, but 4 years later, that would come in extremely handy, or that would be extremely handy for me when you have to go do crowdfunding and write marketing and ad copy. And I already have a bunch of like grabbable lines ready to go. So now I almost sort of plan anything I'm working on with the idea that I'm going to write the back of the book copy. Here's advertising. And I actually have them built into my manuscript template so that they're just done when I'm writing, usually to some crazy, music that's playing in the background.
There's it's interesting the way you're saying you take your chapters and then sort of reinvent them sort of in a way towards, say, marketing, or as you mentioned before, you said like maybe putting it into a Shadowrun or something like that in order to be able to get it almost a different flavor. Do you feel like that adds depth to understanding your plots and characters for just yourself, because it gets you outside of yourself in a sense, going through that process? I don't necessarily think it adds depth to me, because I write very strangely. How do I say this right? If somebody reads or narrates an audiobook back to me or grabs a snippet of something that I have written, I'll be like, wait a minute, I wrote that? What the hell? Because when I write, I almost role play in my head as the characters. And I always have I am that character. And so as soon as I'm done with that chapter, I kind of forget
largely the details of what I have written, unless I go back and read it through and editorial. And also, by the time you get through 8 rounds of editing, you're kind of done with the details of the book anyway. But the commercials and the marketing taglines that you write into the book, even just for fun for yourself, what they've turned into is a great spot to go to for readers to get an instant world hook, teasers, straight little catch lines. And even in RPGs, all of our RPG books, we always wanted to write with full flavor. We didn't want to write dry manuals or manuscripts. We will take them and we'll bake those quotes in front of like every section or every part. And, because sometimes what we write tends to get pretty diabolical or evil or cheeky, and it's all over the spectrum, but we can fill an entire manuscript. So instead of it saying, here's this player class stats and text, we actually get to put in-world flavor and letters in between them, and they're all kind of born from that. So in the RPG sense, it adds a lot of depth to the world, because even if it's a player handbook or an adventure design or something for a storyteller to run, you can quickly look down and always have an in-universe grabbable quote or a magic product that might have been invented, and there's no other context about the magic product sometimes, just other than here's this commercial that could exist in this world. And that does allow the storyteller to create the improv, or even start doing, like, this session was brought to you by Brooke and Talbot's magical items.
That's cool. It's kind of like throwing these anchors out that allow your readers to anchor into this world and really understand it from the writer's perspective by having these little moments. Have you ever read No One Wants to Read Your Shit by Stephen Pressfield?
No, but I need to, because that's a fantastic title.
It really is. I work with a fantastic copywriter. So he all he ever does is like write copy. Never did anything fictional. But Stephen Pressfield, this whole book is about how he spent years and years and years in advertising and writing ads. And he is most famously, I think, known for Legend of Bagger Vance is probably his biggest novel, because it became a whole thing. But he's written dozens and dozens of great, great novels. And in this Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, he just talks about how advertising really taught him how to keep people's attention every single page, and keep people going back to the book and coming back to it, because nobody wants to read your shit is the foundational principle of the book. You have to do that. So from a writer's perspective, I'm hearing how you keep yourself in these states with the music. I'd love to know, do you have any tips on just keeping people hooked on the words?
Write more. That's honestly, it does come down to it. I don't know. That's
just for practice, like write more for practice, or
eventually you get better at your hooks, right? And I guess it does come down to, and I kind of agree with this. Nobody wants to read your shit. If you don't find every chapter that you are writing fun, and the concept of that chapter is fun, and you can't pitch that chapter to somebody in like 2 sentences, and maybe you should rewrite that chapter or cut that chapter out. Because the truth is, like, you can write your first novel for yourself, and then every one after that, you want to write your story and your content, but you gotta have an idea of where the hell this damn thing ends. And that means you have a suspense meter to keep playing. And it's like storytelling any game session that anybody plays at a table, right? You want to end your game sessions, even when you're rolling dice, with a cliffhanger that your players are like, okay, when are we going to play next week, right? Otherwise, you just kind of fall into that campaign that never picks up again.
There are structures within storytelling, though, that I think if you're aware of them, you see them everywhere, right? Would you say that there are certain structures that you kind of anchor to? Like, for example, genre, like, I'm writing this in Western genre, but I'm going to combine that with, a hero's journey, or are there things like that you put a frame on before you get into writing? Or is it just sort of like you discover it as you go through and it emerges what it's going to be?
No, I have a pretty structured method. I think at some point when you first start off as an author, you can kind of maybe pants it. But once you start writing professionally for other game studios or even like multi-line projects, you need to keep some level of, nope, this is an organization, here's a plan. Because a lot of times what will happen is throughout running the studio and everything else that I have to do, you don't get the same benchmarks to sit on down and write and lose yourself or take your time, and you have deadlines that are due. And so having spreadsheets that says, today I'm going to sit on down and I'm going to write this chapter with this beat, with this commercial, here's my soundtrack, all designed ahead of time, means that I can move down that line pretty regularly and consistently. And then when I take my mind out of it and get distracted by another project, if I come back to that, I know exactly where I left off.
Do you think there's some of that comes down to, I do want to get back to Chris's earlier question about your process, but I also wanted to touch on that. Do you think it has to do with expectations that your audience, that you know an audience has? Because as storytellers, we know that we're kind of hardwired from, stories being told around a campfire thousands and thousands of years ago, that our brains are programmed to like certain stories a particular way. Like Joseph Campbell talks about, with like stories all around the world being told following certain arcs and heroes. Is there something in that, like, that we see in movies today, that things follow an arc?
Yeah, a lot of people like default back to the hero's journey a lot, and the various steps that there are for it. And you can splice and you can cut that hero's journey up 1,000 ways, and we hear that a lot in Western fiction in movies and types. Or the 3-act structure is really prominent, as well. I attended all of the panels. I've done all the workshops. I even went to college at one point. I'm like, I'm gonna take my nighttime classes to, learn the story arcs and study. And yes, there's truth to all of it. It's found again and again and again. But it was summed up best for me on Twitter. Person walks outside, other person hits person with a rock, ensue chase. There's your plot line. At some point, some random act of chaos is going to hit you with something. You either have a choice as that character to do something or do nothing. And if your answer is, well, I just go back inside and close the door, well, that's the end of the novel. If chase scene, continues on, you can keep throwing more rocks until story ends.
It's that steady action that keeps moving things forward. We had a similar thing in acting school, which was, of course, because it's called acting, not, enacting. Basically, right? You have to actually step into a scene and do something, and everything you do on stage in some way has an action behind it, right? So, and that's what's captivating, right? Like, because if you're just there and on stage and not doing anything, why the heck are you on stage?
So the way that you put this into play in literary form, whether it be RPG design or novels, is every action should have consequences, good consequences or bad consequences that are going to expand upon the world. And when you're writing an RPG adventure, you don't get to say, you get to like hint the consequences that are in a book, but you have no idea what the players are going to do. So you have to give them amazing hooks to lead them one way or another, but still allow like an open ending that might be there. And in a novel, you get to just put your mind as the character and say, this character is going to take this action and have this consequence, which I know may not be the best one, at least for that character, but it's going to make the best story. And so when I start piecemealing global or world events or personal events for the characters and their consequences, it starts spider webbing into this big giant plot tree. And then from there, I can kind of pick, I like this thread. Here's what I'm going to write a book about.
So you mentioned that, I mean, as TTRPG, homebrewers ourselves, there is always that struggle of finding, like, what will my players want to do? Sure, I have an idea, but you touched on it, and I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit more. You're never really going to know what all the players are going to want to do, especially when you're writing to a large audience rather than just your table. So you said you make really captivating hooks. Can you dive into that just a little bit more?
Yes. So in the Black Ballad, the whole tagline for the book is "You died, now what?" right?
Love it,
And
by the way.
so we wanted to make an RPG because we're homebrewers ourselves, and we wanted to make a campaign book that would fit with everybody's home table, right? For like almost designed for homebrew GMs entirely. And so the book is spliced up. The storyline is into 10 chapters. It's going to explore the implications of what happens, or what are the consequences of resurrection magic in the fantasy setting, right? Because if you bring anybody back from the dead, then why would a king ever need to change his behavior for 100 gold pieces? He can keep getting himself revived, right? He could just stay a tyrant forever. And so in chapter 1, the characters, fall down, they've died, they have the consequences from their actions. Whether or not they know each other, or they're an existing campaign, or it's you're grabbing your friends from 20 years ago and saying, hey, remember your favorite characters? Let's all bring them to the table. This is their last ride. And so there's different ways to get into it. And right out of the gate in chapter 1, the characters come to terms with their death. They see the new setting. They get a chance to have something familiar and have some food or like some quirky elements to them. And then there's a very obvious call to action when they have to either save this cult or let these people die, and then get involved to save a bar. And we found that characters are far more likely to save the bar and the tavern than they are the cult. And so, we put the cult inside of the tavern, right? That was a thing that we were like, okay, let's play test this. But at the end of the adventure, at the end of chapter 1, when the music changes, the sky literally turns crimson red and souls start raining down in mass over the entire setting of Purgatory. And that's where we end the chapter. And the players are like, wait, what's going on? And they're really curious about that, especially when the music starts ramping up towards the finale of chapter 1. And the thing is, in chapter 2, the players, they ruling party of the realm is like, hey guys, don't worry, we got this. You don't have to do anything. Just go into town, get a house, get set up. You're going to be here a while. Don't worry, our guards got this, right? And so what ends up happening for like the first 2 chapters is the players kind of get settled into Purgatory while things are continuously going bad around them. And what we've learned is that we will write with the Red Opera, the Dark Carnival, Cthulhu Dreamt, and the Black Ballad. All of our games have these big cataclysmic world events that are happening in the background that are relevant to that person's city. And it can spiral out of control into a larger, global or multiplanar or something like that if nobody does anything about it. And we straight up tell the storyteller, this is what happens if your players never do anything. And every chapter, this event happens and this thing is happening. The characters can get involved, or they could sit there and, go to the House of the Dawn and gamble some souls, right? Like they can do what they want. It's just that there's consequences and the world starts changing. Things starts getting harder for them. In the Dark Carnival, we start stealing their loot and their memories, and how much of them can we take before you're really willing to step up to the plate and actually fight this extremely bored patron. And these things work really well for homebrew campaigns when you drop them in as narrative hooks, because you as a storyteller can say, hey, we're going to spend 6 sessions, just campaigning over here, doing what we're ready to do. And then when you're as a storyteller already, you could be like, this event happens. And the players are either going to react to that, they're going to ignore it, they're going to join it, or they're going to do nothing. And you right away can pick any one of those outcomes from just the top of your head as an improv storyteller, right? If you remember to say, what happens if the players succeed? What happens if they fail? What happens if they do nothing? Or what happens if they betray it, like join sides with it?
You've mentioned what I heard, and please let me know if there's more. I heard there are micro hooks and macro hooks. The macro ones being that cataclysmic level event, and the micro hooks being more like, hey, your memories are being stolen. Your possessions are being stolen. Because I'm more familiar with the concept of a hook with a micro level. It's like, cool, you came to town and you're looking to strike it rich. Like, now go to the job board. Like there's that. I think as storytellers, it's great if we can add that bigger element of like, this world is bigger than you. And just to prove it, there's a war between giants and dragons happening right over that hill. How is it going to impact you? Let's find out. Like, that's pretty cool. Is there anything else in between in that? If those were the breads in this burger, is there anything in between there as far as hooks? Because I know that there's more.
There is. But I think that's probably where it comes down into the social element of the factions, the NPCs that you meet. We purposely designed social stat blocks and role-playing hints in our books. It's not very often seen, but we have like the role-playing hints, the do's, the don'ts, like social challenge, like DCs and whatnot. But more importantly, we actually have factions and points and ways to get in bed with them and perks for joining them and consequences for others, because as these factions gain power,
yes.
So allowing the players control over their immediate environment in a way is probably the best medium hook I can think of.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you think about it, if you have your group of players and they're in charge of the Rogues Guild in this city, and there's that war between dragons and giants right outside, well, what goods can the Rogue Guild start smuggling in? How are they going to set that up, right? What can they profit from? And that's a little bit more than, the personal hook that's like medium guild, like city politics type stuff. And still underneath, giant kaiju battle happening over the wall.
Yeah, but it gives them that sense of control, like you said. And that's what everyone wants in their game, is to feel like they have control. They're a hero. They're kick-ass in some way. Everyone wants to feel awesome, even if their story starts off as, you all died. You had a TPK, and now here's your campaign setting.
Yep. So, no, I agree with that. That's why we always have multiple endings in our books. We always have generally 4 canon endings towards the end for 2 reasons. One, in case players are snoopy and they, flip to the back of the book and they read all the possible outcomes. And there's like a 5th option that's always like, by the way, storyteller, here's the theme of the books if you want to craft your own. And also, dear player, if you've read this section, just so you know, your storyteller is going to do whatever the hell they want with this book.
Yeah. Nice.
And then the second reason is the multiple choice endings really do allow the players to have actual control over the outcome of the storyline. In the Red Opera, you determine the fate of all warlocks. In the Black Ballad, you determine the fate of resurrection magic. In the Dark Carnival, you're going to learn to be what it means to be evil and magnificent at the same time. Because sometimes just being evil for evil's sake is just too boring, guys.
There should be a reason behind the evil.
Yeah. And Cthulhu Dreamt is just a, apocalyptic, scenario where everybody dies at the end, like all Cthulhu. But do you, praise worship and go willingly into the other realm, or are you gonna, sit back and guns blazing the entire time?
There's so much in there around, your structures that you have in place to make something great as a product, for whether it be a novel or an adventure. And this is something you've built your livelihood on doing that, right? Like this is what you do. And now you have a studio that is fairly sizable, that actually has a catalog of things you've created and you've had your hand in. That's why I want to talk to you. We wanted to see, like, how does one go from being that, doing homebrew stuff for my table around here to now, in a sense, having thousands of people say buy or purchase or buy into your idea and actually want to create something that's a business out of it.
So I definitely didn't start this endeavor thinking I was going to create a small business and start going down the path of like LLCs and contracts and storefronts and e-commerce and distribution networks and product manufacturing. This was not exactly the, nightlife that I first imagined. I started off as a writer, right? And I wanted to publish books and go to Barnes and Noble and do my book signing and then write the next one and then go back to, my 9 to 5 job, right? And, but as I think what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs or people that strike it out and take on more than they can choose or more than they can chew at first is you start finding your niche, right? For me, it was conventions. I would go to conventions and I was doing really, really well at conventions. And then I started partnering with artists to draw illustrations from my novels because that would help me out at conventions stand out a little bit more. And I really, really enjoyed collaborating with artists. And the whole time I'm freelance writing for other game studios. And I'm like, what if we write our own campaign book? What if I have all these art friends and I have all these things? Let's make a campaign book. And so thus, when you have the metal friends and I put all three together and I got everybody together and was like, let's go get a publisher. And we went and we got a publisher, and that experience was very wavy and explosive by the end of it. And either way, though, we learned a lot of lessons about the nature of business, what it takes to manufacture stuff, and also the pitfalls of going into business sort of blindly, right? And because of my day job, I already was a project manager in construction. So I was like, okay, all of these creatives are brilliant, but everybody runs around sort of crazy at the same time. And I have to herd everybody and get everybody to work together to do a thing. Now, turns out, giving and getting out of the way of creatives and letting them do their thing and then paying them to do that thing is really empowering to them, and they will turn out crazy awesome work and they get super passionate about the project. So we started doing that, and we crowdfunded and we were successful, and the Black Ballad came out and then we delivered it, and I was like, oh, we have a studio now. And then it was like, okay, now what do you do? Is this just a one-off, or do you go do it again? And we set up a distribution network. I was like, screw it, we can do this. And then we did it again, and now we're about to go to our third, and we have a lot of projects that are in the works that are coming out in the next like 2 years. And even still today, even though we've only really been in business for about 2 years, we kind of just figured out, hey, this is what our studio's brand is with our books and our projects. We're like, this is what sets us apart from, our beloved friends, because it's a very small community and all of us are making cool things. But I'm like, this is the one niche that we can do. We're a bunch of author writers, or like author writers. That's a horrible term, and please don't edit that out because it's hilarious. Nice. We're a bunch of novel writers, and so we're used to long form fiction. Ergo, we tend to write bigger campaign books.
That's it's fascinating. There's so much in there around what you said around project management, right? Like that, you're leading a team down a road, and very much like a dungeon master, hooking people into doing their jobs, right, and making sure that things get done on time, and all of those logistics. Could you talk a little bit about the crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, I should say, experience, and maybe what's different from your first crowdfunding to the ones you do now? Were there things that really made a difference?
Yes. All right. So when I first started crowdfunding, I had an edge. I had already been a press writer for Geek and Sundry and Nerdist for a long time. And so my job was to actually interview other TTRPG creators and cover their crowdfunding campaigns. So I was very used to hearing the pitfalls that everybody else had done. So even before I started the studio, I actually called up and interviewed Jaren from like Action Fiction Games, Matt over at Mage Hand Press, I went through and I was like, hey, what do you got to learn? And then they looked at me, and a lot of times they were like, Rick, I'm taking notes from you, not the other way around. Like, what are you up to? But early on, I learned always know how you're going to deliver your product, right? Before you go to crowdfunding, have an end goal in mind. And so even from the very first publisher I went to, I made sure there was a path that they knew how to publish before we ever went live to funding. And before we even started Storytellers Forge, I made sure I had printers and distribution lined up before we went to crowdfunding. What I have yet to crack the entire nut of is probably the same nut that every studio head will sit here and say, which is the marketing and engagement, right? Is would I love to get to the point where we could have our book completely developed before we go to crowdfunding? Yes, there are studios that have that. They have that luxury that they can say, we're going to publish this book, we're going to have it. It's 100% done before they even go into crowdfunding. And that gives them a wealth of marketing material, the ability to say, hey, we're going to spend 6 to 8 months building up hype on YouTube and a marketing campaign. And that's kind of how you get towards those, $1 million Kickstarters. At the stage that we're at, it's not quite feasible for me to have that kind of art budget on hand to finish it, but we have gotten better. The Black Ballad, we crowdfunded off just an idea and a dream and a lot of caffeine. The novels, Chronicles of the Crossing, that one, all of the manuscripts were written before we went to crowdfunding, and the same with the Dark Carnival. The entire manuscript was written, and we already had some of the soundtrack done, and we had about 15% of the art done before we go to crowdfunding. So we're getting closer and closer to having the book completed, because the sooner you can deliver the book to people is the sooner they can start reading it, playing it, enjoying it. And also the sooner that you can be like, okay, this book has come out. Here's novels, here's music, here's soundtracks, because you can make other things off of that book more than just a game book. And I would love to do graphic novels or other kinds of storylines based off the settings that we're building, but we got to get the settings out there first.
You're talking about leveraging the other skills that your team has. You just mentioned novels, and you were just talking about how your team consists a lot of these novel writers. Is that a normal thing to create these peripheral kind of goods, in a way, these peripheral products to crowdfunding projects? Is that a normal thing you see?
I've seen it, and I know that like Chaos and Games and Arkham Horror, they have a whole brilliant Arkham Horror line of novels. Even this, choose your own adventure books that they have. And I mean, to me, the idea basically just came from what I grew up on. I grew up reading Dragonlance and the old D&D novels that were titled or Legend of the Five Rings or Vampire the Masquerade novels. I loved those things, and I don't see them that much anymore. I know that at the time that we're recording this right now, D&D Wizards just released an excerpt from the new Ravenloft novel that's coming out, so they're kind of getting back into that as well. And the way I look at it, and both from a business person and a fan, as a business person, you can't just release game book after game book after game book, because realistically, when do we have time to play and use all that content? Right? It's not feasible. And so I don't want to have that company that's just like, here's this module, then here's this one, then here's this one. Especially for the size and the scale that we put into them, it can take somebody about a year to go through the Black Ballad, or they just use it as a permanent setting. The other reason is, if we put all this creative energy and artwork and music into this setting, why not make it into novels, or my hope is graphic novels, or we had voice actors do script reads of things, and we partnered up with an actual play group that this group called Severed Threads, and they're a mix of professional storytellers and Ohio Shakespeare actors. And they do the full makeup, and they get the custom music, and they pre-record their actual plays and do a full production with it. And it's like, okay, well, this is really, really, really impressive. What can we do with this stuff? That's more than just, hi, here's a game book, right? Because we aren't writing in other people's universes. We're writing in our own. And that means we can, well, do what we want with it. So
how much does it cost to really, if I were to create just the game book, and how much is a crowdfunding campaign need to make for anything to even happen?
Okay, so that is, I'm going to answer this in two different tiers. All right, so tier 1 is sort of your small, you're probably going to go print on demand. Maybe it's a paperback style type supplement. You probably want to raise realistically in that 20,000 range. Now, there are people who get by plenty fine underneath that, but when you really total up the cost of your website, your marketing, your time as a writer, because if you don't put your own time in there, you're like, well, I don't have to pay any writers. I wrote it myself. Well, that's great. You've spent your life capital to do that. So what do you got to pay yourself? And same goes with art. Well, I don't have to pay my artists because they're either royalty based or they're, my friend who's co-doing this with me, and we're just going to split the profits. Well, if there are no profits left after you get done with marketing, your print run, your development, your shipment, so 20 grand for a small book can kind of get you. The closer you get to 50, the safer it is, right? Especially with inflation and manufacturing and print costs and everything that has changed. I mean, even Wizard of the Coast, their book prices are now finally going up to a realistic amount. So, $80 for a game book is kind of where you're starting to see things finally settle in on. The other side of that is, let's say you want to make that cool, pretty, full color hardcover book. You're looking at about $116,000 to $120,000 in crowdfunding. And that is counting for you spending a decent art budget. Having an art director, layout design is more expensive than people think, and it's very difficult to find a layout artist. Your print runs are substantial, but you can mitigate print costs based on where you print, although that's about to change or not change. We live in chaotic times. And then there's marketing and your Stripe fees and your transaction cuts from the crowdfunding platforms. Everybody gets a slice of the pie. So when your mom calls you up and says, oh my God, I'm so proud, you raised $150,000 on this crowdfunding campaign, you can be like, yeah, can I come over for dinner? Because I'm broke. Like at the end. But that's where you have to have a bigger imprint than just a 30-day crowdfunding window. So if you think about it, crowdfunding is only 30 days. It helps jumpstart your print run. That should not be the lifespan of the product that you're making, or your business plan for that matter. Because if one of your crowdfundings doesn't hit and that's your only source of income as a small business, well, then your only solution is to go do another crowdfunding campaign. And if that one doesn't hit, now you're in double debt. And you're starting to lie to yourself and play this Ponzi scheme, right? And the next thing you know, you go belly up, and then none of the backers get the rewards because you can't fulfill them. And that's plenty of stories about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the risk of crowdfunding. We've all heard or backed something that just didn't wind up either delivering quality or just delivering at all. I'm curious, like you mentioned rewards. When somebody puts together a crowdfunding operation, they're essentially creating an offer for people, right? And I always think about it through the lens of digital marketing and sales, which is my background. And I think about a really compelling offer for people to jump into. And generally, crowdfunding will have a series of offers. So they'll have you can buy the base book for a certain amount of money. And you can also then have all these other tiers of advanced rewards. I'm curious, two things. One, what makes some really cool offers or compelling offers that people actually want to spend 500, 1,000, 2,000 or more? And I'm curious, out of creating the full offer to say, I need to raise $200,000 or whatever that goal is, $1 million. What percentage do you put at this is how many people are going to buy the base tier? And then here's where all the serious contenders are, and how much percentage is that going to be? Is it like a 50-50 or is it kind of like a 30-70? I'm curious, how do you think about that from the economics?
So I tend to, I've moved towards keeping our Kickstarters or crowdfundings very, very simple, generally 4 tiers, right? We have the high tier reward, and the one that I think I will always default to because it's fun for us as creators is always you get to be in the book in some capacity. For the Black Ballad, we let people submit themselves, their dead characters, and we actually hired a mortician to write official obituaries for their characters and put them in the book, right?
Nice.
And so stuff like that that's just fun, I think is a really good high tier, because you only have one chance to get into the book, and so it is as exclusive as it can be, right? Events and other things can happen at any point that are out there, but getting into a book only can happen once when you're in layout process and you're doing that. So I think it's actually a fun, rare reward for crowdfunding campaigns. The second one is limited edition items for us, and it doesn't matter what those are. I think that's kind of universal, but things that I'm just not going to ever make again. And that for us at Storytellers Forge has become our loot boxes. That's where we're going to put in the soundtracks, the novels, we're going to get custom tea or coffee made and throw it in, like your custom set of dice. And we put it all in one loot box rather than give you 50 choices to the side, mostly because analysis paralysis is a real thing, and haven't found that it's any better to have the options all individually versus, hey, we're going to throw it all in your box and just pick up that and you get everything, right? So we do that. Plus, it's a lot easier on our end for logistics, and we're a small team, so it's everybody gets a box. Here you go.
Yeah, one simple offer of all the loot. Give me all the loot, right?
Yeah.
Is there any loot you avoid, or any loot you really embrace? I'm curious.
I'm hearing a lot of immersion, but I don't hear any candles yet.
We have fragrances. We actually do.
All right.
That's a new thing. That was actually what gave us our last piece of the puzzle. Was we partnered with Mad Lab Studios because we were at a convention and our booths were right next to each other, and we were just vibing so well with everything. And they're like, we have this cinnamon fall apple nutmeg thing that's perfect for this. And I'm like, can I put that in a loot box? And they go, yes. And they go, we'll talk on Wednesday. We're already off to the races. It's
oh, fun. There's some really great candle makers out there in the nerd world. We've met a few of them at our conventions like ECC and fan expos and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Plus 10 candles is my favorite game ever. But to answer your question of what products I stay away from, I stay away from things that I can't have, that I have to go manufacture. To be honest, when we did the Black Ballad, I had this great idea to give everybody a bundle of 5 character sheets with their last will and testament and everything like that for free if you backed early, right? And it was the shrink wrapped thing, and then an ST screen, and what was the other one that I had made? Oh, this map, this big giant fold out map, right? Things that you would normally see on any crowdfunding campaign, right? And what it turned into is those 3 little items, the character sheet bundle that I was giving away for free, the maps, and the ST screens, we had the absolute biggest nightmare getting produced, done, because we had to go to different people that could only make those specific things, which meant 3 separate freight shipments. And then we also lost one of them when the boat like turned sideways and they had to like send another one, where I actually had to tell all the backers, I was like, guys, the character sheets are for free at our website. I'm really sorry, but you have a choice. I can delay this crowdfunding fulfillment by 2 months for the boat to get over here, or you can just go without character sheets. It was like 99% people were like, just give us the box. We can download the sheets and print our own. We're not really sold by them that much. So I have a garage full of character sheets we hand out at conventions now.
Nice. Good reason to stop by your table, right?
Yes. But that's why we have a lot of immersive stuff, right? Novels, poker decks, fragrances, coffees, teas, things we can partner up with people that have a lifespan beyond the box that are not necessarily tied to that product. Because another lesson I learned is if everything in that box is 100% reliant upon that core book, you can't mix and match later. Like, people like our poker decks, they like our tarot decks that we make, and the novels stand alone. But C.D. Corrigan wrote a novel about stealing memories, which is perfect for a dark carnival, where it's about stealing memories. And so it's very easy for me to pair those together, because the Black Ballad and the Dark Carnival share a universe, and I can grab this one and put it over here. So learning how to a guy from a restaurant, my friend works at this restaurant Portillo's, and told me, hey, he's like, when you start paying attention to restaurants and you walk in and you look at their ingredient menu, you realize that all of their ingredients sometimes in good restaurants can be used to make every other dish in just some other capacity.
Such a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so like you want to be using, you don't want to have waste, right?
Right.
And that's especially apparent in the restaurant business, where waste leads to ruin. And basically in D&D business, I mean, there's probably, the margins may seem like they're higher than they actually are based on what you're telling us, because the the $150,000 you need to generate just to break even on a book essentially is a lot, right? It's a lot for people. So what percentage, I wanted to go back to that. Do you know, like, what percentage would be, say, like lower tier versus, say, maybe the top second, third, fourth? Like, do you think about it like that? Or is there, because there's some that also in the context, is that some will be like, here's 5, there's only 5 of this. There's a built-in scarcity to this $1,000 thing or whatever, right? And so there must be a way of thinking through that you're saying, I'm only going to give 5 of these, or I'm only going to give 10 of these.
Well, so since one of them is based off of being in the book,
if you're enjoying this interview and want to listen to the full 2-hour talk, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/nerdpreneur. We have more than 30 full interviews over there and dozens of short video interviews from cons and expos we've been to. If you're starting or currently running a business and want to learn from those already crushing it, there's a wealth of firsthand experience collected right there for you. That's patreon.com/nerdpreneur.
I feel like now is a great time to transition over into random rolls.
I think it's a good time.
Do you have that D100 ready?
I have 2 D10s, which will serve as the classic Riffs
Excellent.
or Vampire the Masquerade percentile dice.
Perfect. So what this entails is we're going to have you roll that D100 a few times. The first time, we will take that number, we will consult our very mysterious list and ask you a question. These are typically less serious and more fun, but sometimes they get downright mean. So, go ahead and roll.
We're going to begin this with a great classic number of 75, good sirs.
Oh, a respectable 75. Do you have a tabletop pet peeve?
Ooh, See, the problem is I don't know if it's whether or not I'm just going to go with storytelling. I'm the forever GM. My tabletop pet peeve is hands down eating at the table.
You don't like people eating at the
Yeah,
table?
that's my thing. Is like somebody's like, okay, it was all because I had one guy with a bucket of chicken sitting there at the table and he was making the lippy smacking noises, and I'm trying to narrate this villain's art speech, and it's just you hear him like licking his fingers and crunching on the fry, and I was like, Adam, will you please stop with the fried chicken?
I've built the suspense and you're ruining it.
And then there's the smell, and it can knock people out of whatever like thing. No, food at the table is probably. Now I will be down with food and drink prior to game, and we will make custom food there. But at the table, no, guys. And then somebody spills
Fried chicken doesn't add to the catacomb immersion.
Yeah. Unless it's, fried cobalt, I guess. But, but also somebody spills their drink on their character sheet, and then the whole weeknight's ruined. Yes. No, food at the table. That's my pet peeve.
Good. All right. So what, even ruffles or something like that? Like no crunch?
Oh, I imagine doing the whole diabolical monologue and the speech and in character. And like, unless that bard's sitting there eating the chips in character, like, you go, girl. Just, you got this.
Monologue at me.
All right. Let's roll again.
All right. 79.
What is the most impractical use of the Force?
Most impractical use of the Force.
Yes. The thing that binds us, that connects us all together.
The midichlorians that run through our veins.
Above us, around us, below us. The most important force in the universe. What would be an impractical use of it?
What's funny is I'm probably going to say trying to see the future. Or using like that Force foresight always seems utterly pointless, because there is clearly no fate dictated in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
And the prophecies are always going to be misconstrued. It is more practical to use the Force to pick up your coffee cup from across the room to save you that 10 extra steps than it is to try to predict that the dark side is coming. Because guess what? It's going to be there, guys. You already know that. So that's my take.
Yeah, and it's always like, oh, you can't quite see it. They don't know, because that'll give away the end of the movie. Of course,
right.
They can't. Future seeing is not valid reason.
So foresight or danger sense or anything like that. Guys, you live in the Empire. There's bad guys. They got guns. They got lightsabers. They can't shoot worth hell. You're going to walk out of there anyway. You'll be fine.
Awesome. Well, we're going to move into the third section here, which is rapid fire. So here, these are quick, silly questions. And I'm going to start off, as always, with Star Trek or Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Who's Yoda or Obi-Wan?
Obi-Wan.
Why didn't Frodo ride the Eagles all the way to Mordor? Wrong answers only.
I can't say bad developmental editing. Why didn't Frodo ride the Eagles? Halflings are natural prey to eagles.
There you go. They're tiny and eagles are big.
Yep.
What's your favorite fantasy book, excluding your own?
King Rat by China Miéville.
I'll have to look into that. Who is more evil, Dolores Umbridge or Voldemort?
Dolores Umbridge.
What is the best munchie?
Oreos.
That's a good answer.
Best captain in the Star Trek franchise.
What's a Star Trek?
He said Star Wars, Frank. He said Star Wars.
But I'm still going to ask.
He's still going to push the issue. 3 favorite pizza toppings.
It's sausage. Cheese is a default. It is not an additional topping. So sausage, giardiniera, and pepperoni. No, roasted garlic.
What was the middle one? Giranera? What is that?
Giranera? It's like the hot peppers. Like
melody. Okay, gotcha. All right.
It's kind of like a pickled. It's not quite pickled. It's more like a relishy kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I recently discovered it like this year. Yeah, it's not out here in the West very much. Anyway, sticking in the food vein, favorite ice cream flavor?
Moose Tricks. That's like chocolate, peanut butter, like dark chocolate type stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we got that in Canada. Moose.
Yeah. Oh, we got it from you. We just poured it down. It's lovely.
Predator or Aliens?
Predator.
What character would you cosplay at Comic-Con?
Judge Dredd.
That's a good one.
The Carl Urban variety.
Yeah, that's a good one. Not the Stallone? You sure? Oh, man. What's the best Dorito flavor?
Cool Ranch.
Correct.
What alignment do you play in real life?
Ooh, it's torn. It's either lawful evil or lawful good. Or sorry, lawful evil or chaotic good. One of the two. I have a set of rules, right? Because I have this whole rant about the way the 9 alignment system doesn't work, and the way that evil is actually looking out for you and those around you. And that's a whole separate rant, and I kind of wrote a lot about evil in our recent book in the 9 alignment scheme. So lawful evil by definition is you have a code of ethics. You are very Dr. Doom. You look out for those who are around you. You care, you protect for them, you watch out for them, and you won't stray from your own path, but you're not going to accept the rules of society in all cases. And, I think that's very telling of a lot of people probably right now based on political spectrums. And, and then chaotic good, hey, if I could paladin, I would paladin, right? Be a good person. But I think of late, I've got to go with lawful evil.
Lawful evil is I think it's one of my favorite alignments because there's a specific willingness to exist in society, and kind of work around it. That I think lawful evil really allows them to be in the party. I just find, if you're chaotic, you're going to just be crazy, right? So
and just where it's at, right? Some people can earn so much money and shape so much, and I'm not going to play by those laws.
And right is a spectrum, whatever. Right? Like we can. Yeah, what's right for this? What's right for the? I think it's healthy for a lot of groups to have someone in that vein in their party, just to balance out the role play and the strategizing. Yeah,
evil is such a defined concept by the nature of the world and society that they are looked at, and what might be considered evil to a society of undead necromancers will probably be considered very, very different than your classic Lord of the Rings Hobbit village.
Yeah. So
what's too far for those that are already on the edge? Like, what do they consider too far?
It might be like giving cupcakes to your freaking neighbor, or bringing holy relics into the kingdom.
Yeah, necromancers may not appreciate natural birth. They just only want undead birth. That's the way you can bring life about is through undeath. And so, if you have someone who's evil in that society, that really starts to make an interesting campaign, right?
It's one thing I write about in all of our campaigns. I always try to define what is outlawed in this city. What does this society count as evil? And that's a benchmark for crime and what makes an underworld or an above world or how the society might operate.
Do you think of these things a lot? This is a side question. Do you think of a lot of your worlds when you build them with like charts and Excel spreadsheets for not like statistics and graphs, but do you see like, okay, this is a question. These are like a series of questions that I need for every world, and I have to fill in those cells?
Yes, we call it the Bibble. It has canonically been dubbed the Bibble in our studio.
Because this is how I think. And I hear it when you've been talking this evening, and I'm just like, this speaks to me. There's something deeper here that I understand.
Courtney, she purposely named our studio master style guide the Bibble, and it has become a beloved term for the behind the scenes document of what is the world, and we have to fill these things out so we can give them to other writers.
Nice.
What's your zombie apocalypse weapon of choice?
I've thought about this one a lot, and I am gonna have to go with a classic. I'm gonna have to go with a bow and arrow is my want to go to default, but that gets very dangerous very fast. So I think I'm gonna go with an axe.
Good.
Last 3 books you read.
Last 3 books I read were Slaying the Dragon, The History of TSR by Benjamin Riggs.
I just read that, by the way, on your recommendation. I just finished it 2 weeks ago, and it's awesome. So
yes,
you told us about that when we last chatted, and I dove into it when I was doing all the recent episodes that we released. But yeah, good recommendation.
Space Opera 2, as one of my friends, books that I picked up and read. And then what was the title of that one? Talos by Brian Anderson. And Talos was this cyberpunk cyberpunk anarchist, but spin on its head, where they're like the terrorists, where the punks are. You're looking at it from the corporate side and how they are disrupting society. So it was an inverted fiction, and it was good. It was good. So those are the last 3 that I've read.
Nice. Who's the best Spider-Man actor?
I'm gonna go with Tobey Maguire.
Perfect answer.
I can't
Thank you very much.
There's so many people that like Tobey Maguire.
I keep saying it, man.
Dude, we were just talking about his Venom walk the other day after we saw Thunderbolts.
He was tremendous.
All right, this is going to be a charged question, but we talked a little bit about this earlier. Pizzas. What type of pizza? Chicago style, New York style, or thin crust Italian?
So in Chicago, the biggest misunderstanding is that we actually have all 3. Thin crust Italian is like a breakfast or a nice little snack on your way to work. New York style pizza is what you pick up on the street when you're going to the next place. And Chicago style deep dish is what you invite for all your friends and family when they come on over. And go to Pequod's. Please don't go to Giordano's. Right? If you're going to do this like a proper Chicagoan, the answer is all.
Oh, that sounds right.
Of course.
I can't wait to go to Chicago and have my pizza experience.
Pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes.
Man. All right. How many cats is too many cats?
3.
Now, I'm going to ask another. This one's actually a tough question. Will there be jobs for writers after AI?
Yes. And here's why I think there will be jobs for authors. AI can get awesome. AI will eventually outstrip us, but people aren't necessarily going to follow AI. Eventually, people follow authors, not so much books. They follow series, right? And those series are always written by somebody. Inevitably follow that author, for better or worse, as very well known by 2 very high profile authors, sort of doing things that have ostracized them from their communities entirely. I mean, come on, J.K. Rowling and Neil Gaiman, blow on up, but at the same time, people followed them for years. Stephen King is a name because of Stephen King. Eventually, when an author makes enough books and people fall in love with those books, they follow that author and they follow them through different stories in different places. I don't see that necessarily happening with AI to the same degree. Now, will authors... AI can write. Will AIs create? like fundamentally completely different worlds without prompt engineering. Who knows, right? Will they ever twist artwork and make stories out of thin air? No, I don't know if they will. And if they do, great. Is that going to replace human authors? I don't think so.
I kind of tend to agree with you in many ways too, because there's definitely power in the AI, but generally when you tell it to do something, it acts as a really good filter, if that makes sense. Like if you have a story and you say, hey, can you add Western elements to it? It's really good at doing something like that, but it's not necessarily great at coming up with twists and turns and engaging, interesting stuff that, on its own that I think it knows to appeal to humans. It might get to the point where it gets really good at that, but right now it still feels like it's more of a curation tool and needs to be curated by someone who understands the audience or understands what's like kind of the game master or the master storyteller to make it work.
I think the two literary positions that are probably most in danger of being outstripped by AI sooner than anybody else are copy editors and language translators. So those are two I can see of like, hey, polish off dev editing, right, which is the whole storyline, editorial, right? But copy editing, it's as soon as AI can do copy editing in a Word document, I think that's a publishing game industry changer, because the Chicago Manual of Style is a fixed set of rules.
Yeah. And imagine if would an AI ever come up with the idea for your last concept of like what happens after your party dies, right? Like, are they really going to come up with something like that? Or is it going to be when you start inputting those ideas into it, it can play around with those things. I feel like garbage in, garbage out. Like if you're not a writer, AI is not going to help you.
Sure. And also right now, I don't think anybody who's actually writing has much to fear at the moment from AI, because you can tell, and it is so
the nuance of experience is missing completely.
Yeah.
From because part of what I love about your tagline being the campaign after a TPK, AI doesn't realize the significance of a TPK. It doesn't understand how impactful that is, but also how there's kind of a chuckle to it. It doesn't get that. Or it doesn't get just the, when you tell or when you write a story about something that's heart-wrenching that ties into a personal part of your life in maybe just a sliver that another human can relate to. AI doesn't get that nuance either because it doesn't have the experience to pull on. It just imitates.
When it gets to AGI, right, and it actually becomes an artificial generative intelligence and can sit there by itself and conceive of its own novel idea of a story it wants to trap about, in its own existence, right? Yeah, then, hey, maybe I'll, curiously take a peek, but I'm not necessarily going to follow that thing's journey, all through ever. I'm going to be rooting for that thing to be like, can you just make me a cyborg, please? Let's go.
Right.
Give me the upgrades.
Hey, they were still great writers in Star Trek. And, they had wonderful, incredible AI in Star Trek, but
wait a minute,
people were still writers.
Who in Star Trek was a writer? What fictional character was a writer?
I'm sure there was definitely a story or two about a person writer. Oh, didn't Wesley want to be a writer at some point? Wasn't that his whole thing?
That was Cisco's son, but he wasn't a writer. He was a journalist, a reporter.
Very similar. Anyway, I'm just trying to bring up that there were writers that happened in the future.
Sorry you had to be here for this, Rick. But Chris, come on.
Are we going to have another Star Trek argument in front of a guest? No.
We might have to. This is out of hand.
Well, Rick, this has been awesome and amazing to actually chat with you on mic about what you do and sharing all the wisdom. And thank you so much for your time. We like to finish off our interviews, though, with something a little inspirational. And there's so many people listening that would want to be doing what you're doing, or at least working in their specific niche, bringing their passion to reality and making it a successful business. That's who we talk to, and that's who our people are. I wanted to ask you, for aspiring nerdpreneurs out there, what advice would you give them to move into their nerdy passion?
Whatever you begin, always have that 3-year outlook to what you're trying to do. Because if you go and you get your first set of failures, and everybody is going to tell you again and again and again, and probably on this podcast, every other person is like, oh, don't give up early on, because there is actually some element of truth to that, right? You start small and you just keep building up of what you are doing. And if after 3 years it doesn't work, well, then maybe you'd be like, hey, I made a thing, I did a thing, and you can still walk away before it's too late. But that's my rule. Or the second one is, if you are going to create something nerdy for fun, imagine you were going to try to sell it, and then start from that point. If you're going to take your passion, how are you going to get it to other people that are not your local family? And if you start with that in your mind, it helps you envision where you need to go to get to that point.
Love that. Love that. Well, Rick, where can people find stuff from you, buy some of your awesome adventures, or what have you got coming up that people can help you guys out with?
So the biggest spot you can find Storytellers Forge is storytellersforge.com or SD Forge Studios on just about every platform, including TikTok, because we do actually post stuff there. YouTube is quickly becoming our primary. And this summer, we have 2 awesome releases coming out. One of them is the Chronicles of the Crossing. Remember that Black Ballad, the perfect adventure after the TPK? We had 4 novelists read the setting and then tell their own stories of full fantasy novels. We have war-torn mystery. We have necromantic heist, like rogue punk fiction. We have star-crossed lovers. So each novel is a different tale within the Black Ballad universe, the setting of the Sunless Crossing, about the perils of purgatory, the adventures within there. And all 4 of them releases a box set this summer, just in time to come out with Dia Morte's the Black Ballad heavy metal album, that the whole orchestra that pairs with this actually tells the story of the rivalry between 2 characters in the RPG that hate each other. And they got like the Doom Eternal Choir and like everybody else working. And that's the full lyrical, like if you enjoy metal music, listen to that. And but the Black Ballad novel series comes out on June 7th, and it'll be available everywhere. You can already start reading reviews of it online because the Goodread arcs have already gone out. And then the other book that's coming out this summer is The Seventh Age Decay, which is my personal novel series. And my novel series is sarcastic urban fantasy about the end of the world after we bring myth and magic crashing back into us, and playing around with that concept.
Sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rick. And thank you to everyone who's listening, tuning in. And as always,
keep it nerdy.